DC-4, the 6s, the Atlantic used to have, DC-7s. They're all just of an era when flying was what flying was all about. I'm David Hamilton. I'm the lead engineer with the group here. So here we are, you can see that's mother of pearl. I don't know if that's the official name for the aircraft or not. It could be possible nose art in the future. That's a little, anybody that comes on board, anybody is more than welcome to tour the aircraft anytime. Weekends are the best time because there's usually somebody here.
Right.
That's basically a short history of the aircraft.
Excellent.
That's the other one that was here.
What happened to her?
She was cut up for scrap. But we do have parts off this. We have 2 engines off it. We have the undercarriage. The flight deck went to a museum outside Liverpool. The fuselage was cut up for scrap. The wings were used, I believe, in a remake of the film The Mummy. But I haven't seen it as yet, so I don't know. But anyway, the aircraft when she was originally delivered and the scheme that she wore. So very nice grey underbelly, black stripe and the white top. And then obviously a little bit of history. She was not a hospital ship, but a ferry ship. So what it did, served in the 3 conflicts, Second World War, in the Pacific Theatre, Korea and Vietnam, and it was used basically to bring blood and supplies in for wounded to the hospitals, and then the wounded soldiers were evacuated or medevaced out from the war zone back to relative freedom and treatment in the hospitals. So that's what she was used for. We've got a couple of stretchers here just to imitate how they would have been fitted out. And then going on, we've got she served also for the Marines as well as the US Navy, and this is the squadron badges. This is when she was based in the Philippines. And then this is some of the repairs that were previously carried out. And what we have is a little bit of damage on the wing spars, but we've got an approved repair to do that. We need to do this before the aircraft can fly again. This is one of the spare engines that's came across in the aircraft in the fuselage. We have this engine now. And just a demonstration of how people used to work and the relative state of the aircraft. And then, yep.
That's the famous photograph.
Famous photograph from the Berlin Airlift.
But she never went there.
This one didn't. She was always in the Pacific. She is in the scheme for the Berlin Airlift, but this aircraft didn't operate on the Berlin Airlift. So that's a little bit more. We can talk about this. We've got some of the projected costs. These are a little bit out of date now. So a lot of stuff we've had gifted or donated. And the bottom line at the minute, we're looking at, there it says at 850. We would estimate that to be approximately 1 million now. But with everybody's help and support, we will get there. We've done magnificent in the last year and a half, as people will have seen. We're a little bit of an underdog. People would have looked at this and said, no, it's impossible, it can't be done. But when you think how a small team of volunteers got together, and we've basically got 3 engines running on this girl now. It's amazing for a small team what dedication can do, and that's what it's all about. Dedication and enthusiasm, which we have bucket loads of. So going back, as I said, this was a troop transport. These, what we refer to as sidewall linings, were the whole way up, all the way around the fuselage, and we had them stripped out so that we could inspect the skin for corrosion or any damage. When it was removed, we found these litter strap stowage pouches. That's for the straps for the stretchers to put them onto the roof. These strap stowages were originally fitted in 1945. That's original equipment that nobody knew was there to this day until everything was
Bit
removed.
of hidden treasure.
Hidden treasure, yeah.
Hidden treasure. You found 4 of them, did you?
All of them.
Oh, right.
All
They were all behind the panel.
All behind the linings.
Why?
They just, it's
Fell
easier to
down.
cover over them than take them off.
Yeah, yeah.
Why put the effort into taking something off when you can just cover it over and forget about it? Yes, this was the crew quarters. There's 2 crew bunks here. Last night I was sleeping there. I normally spend at least 2 days a week up here, so stay over in the bunk. This area here, there used to be a wash basin here.
Where are the pin-ups?
Oh, we don't have any of them. We had to take them down. So there used to be a wash basin here. We'll look at trying to get all the original equipment back in. Then you have the radios and things here, and what we call
these originals.
These are original, old-fashioned HF and VHF. Different things. I can't read without my glasses, but all the radios will be in here. This was the crew lavatory, not the most glamorous. We got a head. A head in the head.
I think it's a pun.
Yeah. So that's the crew area, and then just forward to the crew area. No worries. We'll swap positions temporarily.
Well, if we come out,
Yeah, sorry.
This is the main crew area, and this aircraft was a 4-crew operation at the business end. So you had a pilot, a co-pilot here. This position was the radio operator, so there would be radio equipment here as well, all those dials and things. And we even, I can show you, have a big old Frankenstein switch on the wall. And if you're wondering what that was for, it was for changing over antennas, because we've got the long wire antennas, as they are known, on the outside of the aircraft. And if you had to change from one antenna to the other, you flipped the switch and Frankenstein would come alive.
Whoa.
So this was the radio operator here, and then we don't have it at present, but there would have been a stool here, almost like a bar stool, was mounted just here and here, the mounts for it. And this stool was for the navigator, so the navigator would be using his navigation instruments here. There would be a drift meter measuring through to the outside here, looking if you're drifting off your course and how much the wind was taking you and deviating you left or right of where you should be going. And then obviously at night, because they didn't have GPS and things like that in them days, if you look straight up above you, we have the Astrodome, and that is basically a blister window, and the navigator would stand up in here with his head here, look outside at the stars, and use sextant navigation to gain a fix of where you were, and where you were going. No smartphones, no, nothing at all. Whoa. And then these aircraft, they take 2 people to start the engines. So basically, as you may have seen on some of the engine runs, you may have seen one of our other engineers here, Owen. He was signalling outside to the ground guy out through the window, so he'd hold 4 fingers up to indicate engine 4 is going to start. The guy on the ground makes sure everything's clear and the engine is good to start, and he'll say 4 and spool up. And then what you would do is you have a start switch here, 1 for each engine, so we got 4, 3, 2, 1. And if you notice, just on the inside of that switch, there's another little momentary push switch. So it's just push on, and what that is the primer. So Owen's looking out the window, and as soon as he hits the starter, you count 6 blades going past. We usually look at the bottom, so once it goes past the 6 o'clock position at the bottom, 6 blades, you start priming. While you're priming, somebody else turns on the ignition, and then the ignition will start, the engine will start to catch, so it'll and start going. When it starts to catch, the other person is down here and he's on the fuel lever, so he will then open the fuel lever to let the fuel go into the engine. And once the fuel starts going in, then you don't need to do the primer. The engine accelerates and stabilizes, and it normally sits around about 850 RPM on tickover. And then we've got different controls here. We've got controls for the supercharger, we've got controls for the cowl flaps down below in blue. Up here we've got 2 sets of throttles, so the pilot has got 1 set of throttles and the co-pilot has a 2nd set of throttles, and they're just normal throttles like on any plane, even a jet plane. But you also have a prop control here, and this controls the pitch of the propeller. And what you would have heard on the engine run on number 1, when they brought the speed up a little bit, they exercised this. So we start with it in course pitch, and then once the engine is stabilized and the oil pressure is good and the oil temperature has risen, then we'll bring this back into a fine pitch, and you would have heard the engine note change outside. And then we would have went back into course, and then up here what we probably would have done is push that in and feathered the prop. So that operates a hydraulic pump which pumps in, and the blades then go into what they call the feathered position. So if you had to shut down an engine, you don't want your blade like that and the wind pushing against it, causing drag and trying to turn the prop. So you feather it, and and the blade will turn so it's as straight onto the slipstream as possible, and then it doesn't what we call windmill. And that's done through the feathering control. So you've got engine starts there. We've got the fuel pumps here. We've got one for each wing tank. We're using number 2 tank, and then through the fuel cross feed we're feeding from the number 2 out to the number 1 engine and across to the number 4 engine. This is that's the master switch for the engine magnetos. So you've got mags, and you've got 2 magnetos per engine. You normally start on both, and then once everything's run up and stabilized, you do what they call a mag check, exactly the same on the light aircraft these days. So you'll bring it up to maybe 1200 RPM. You switch off one mag and you see if you've got any drop in RPM. The maximum allowable drop on one of these engines is 40 RPM with one mag off. Then you do the second mag and see if you've got any drop, and if everything's good and it's within less than 40, you have both mags on, and you usually taxi out and go for takeoff. And then we have both right mag, left mag and off, as well as the master off. And if you're wondering about the mags or the magnetos, there's 2 magnetos per engine. This is standard even on the light aircraft, your Pipers and your Cessnas. And one mag powers the spark plugs on the front plug of each cylinder. So there's 14 spark plugs on the front mag, and then the other mag powers the aft ring of spark plugs, so there's another 14 on the aft. So each engine's got 28 spark plugs. A lot of spark plugs, and it's quite impressive. Quite impressive.
Did radials get any bigger than this, or were they?
Radials went bigger. Yep. Pratt & Whitney were, as they said, their slogan, Pratt & Whitney dependable engines. You had smaller engines, the 980s I think it was, 1340s, 1830 is a famous Pratt & Whitney engine, used to power the DC-3s mostly. Catalinas, PBY.
How much bigger would a Constellation engine be?
The Constellation engine were, I believe, Wright 4360 engines. Just going back on the Pratt & Whitneys, the different numbers, R stands for radial, and then the number after that, the 1830, or in this case R2000, that's the cubic capacity in inches, so 2000 cubic inches per engine, which is about 33.5 litres. Quite an impressive engine. The biggest ones that Pratt did were the R2800s, I believe, and they powered the DC-6s and the DC-7s. And they also had things like turbo compounding and things on the, you know, everybody thinks these days of the boy racers and their cars with the turbos in them, but they didn't realize turbochargers were actually in the 1940s designed and used, not on cars but on aircraft, and different things like that.
Like we've forgotten that Wi-Fi used to be called wireless.
Yes, yes. Going on to the engines, I think the biggest engine, radial engine, was the I think it was the Wright 4360, and that had I could be wrong, I think 36 cylinders, 4 rows of 9 and 2 plugs per cylinder again, so 36 times 72 spark plugs per engine. And I think that was they were in things like the what were they in? Possibly the B29, KC97, stuff like that. That end, the big engine anyway. I know it was nicknamed the corn cob because it looked like a corn on a cob with if you imagine the little corn things, each one of them was a cylinder, and this was impressive. A corkscrew of cylinders, because you have to offset the cylinders so the airflow going past will cool them as much as possible, and the further back it is, the more difficult it is to cool. So what we've got 2 banks, so you've 2 cylinders like that, and then the other one is behind it in between, and then again. So the airflow was passing between 2 to the aft cylinder to cool it more.
How did they stop people, how did they stop planes from sort of going off to the left or going off to the right with these, if all these propellers are turning in the same direction?
In the same direction.
How do they cure that? What's contra-rotating comes to mind? Is that...
Contra-rotating was an interesting development where they two propellers were mounted on a coaxial spindle, so one would turn to the left, one would turn to the right. There is an awful lot of torque generated through the engines, obviously. It's not something I've studied a lot of, but I do know in big aircraft, even Spitfires and things like that, the torque will pull quite considerably.
What about big jobs like this where there's 4 of them talking?
I know on the new Airbus A400M, they have props. 2 engines go one way and the other 2 engines go the other way. Again, I think that a lot of that has to do with airflow, but if you think of all the propeller aircraft throughout history, they nearly all turn the same way, with the exception of British Aerospace Jetstreams. They have a left and a right engine. One of them things, they just seem to work themselves out. It's all in better engineers than me know about, and they designed it to do what it does. So,
anything else here that you would like to say a little word? What's the spindle at the top?
The spindle on the top, everybody looks at that and they go, oh, what's that?
Yeah.
That is what we call the rudder trim wheel. So if the aircraft is flying along and it's constantly blowing to one side, what you would do is you'd adjust and put a little bit of trim in by turning that, and that operates a little tab on the back of the rudder, which gives it a slight bit of deflection, and you don't have to alter the flying controls to keep going one way or the other. It trims the aircraft to fly.
And that's called the trimmer?
A trim. That's a rudder trim, yeah.
Yeah.
We also have the elevator trim here, which trims the tailplane. And down the side here we have the aileron trim, which is left. So if the aircraft is flying like that all the time and the pilot has to put in a bit of left stick to bring the wings level, well, you just trim it with the aileron trim, and that'll bring it level, and he doesn't have to do the work through the stick.
Would these have automatic pilots?
This has one of the very first automatic pilots, which is these 3 instruments here in this sort of black rectangle. That will work. All the controls for it are down underneath the floor here. They're all intact. We can get that all up and running, and we can have an autopilot on this. Interesting one over to the side here. This is literally this is the steering wheel for the plane when it's on the ground. This is what we call the nose wheel steering. So when you turn that, it will operate the hydraulic jacks on the nose leg to turn the wheel left or right.